I'm with the jazz legend Reggie Workman.
Hey, it's great to be here. Great to be here with you. Thanks for coming and thanks for being a part of this great effort.
Yeah, man. So I spent the last week since this got set up, I made a Spotify playlist. I know that's not the most musician-friendly way to listen to things, but I made a playlist just so I could try to get a sense of things in your discography that I haven't heard. So it turned out to be like 225 hours or some incredible amount of music, and I've just been loving it, man.
Give me an example of where you are, what you were listening to.
All right, there was a lot of Mal Waldron. There was Sonny Fortune. There was Elvin Jones. There was Alice Coltrane. There was John Coltrane. There was Marion Brown. There was Roy Ayers. There was Herbie Mann. There's things, Pharoah Sanders, Karma. The things, Lee Morgan. So then my head's spinning with questions, but I don't know. Maybe you have something to say right off the bat.
That's part of my life. You know, I am very fortunate to have been called upon to do projects and collaborate with all those great people, and I feel blessed. And the Creator laid that task on me and laid that opportunity on me, and it's been fruitful.
Yeah, the Creator had a master plan.
Exactly.
So one question that I just wanted to pick your brain about is something that Phil Shapp, who you're probably aware of.
Of course.
He said, we don't live in the times where you can talk to the first cellist who played with Beethoven when he had a symphony, but you can talk to someone like you who played with Roy Haynes or who played on Pharoah Sanders' Karma or whatever.
Speaking of Roy Haynes, I'll go and say happy birthday to him, his 94th birthday last night.
Oh, yeah.
And the band, and he sounded good. He was in great spirits. That was a good experience.
He is an amazing
I'm glad
guy.
You brought his name up.
Yeah. So if you want to just set the record straight somehow, what do you think? What might people get wrong in 100 years, or even now, about what was happening in this renaissance of music that you were taking part of?
Well, I don't know whether they'll get it wrong or not. In 100 years, they may have looked into it thoroughly enough to know what was happening, how important it is as far as social evolvement is concerned, as far as spiritual evolvement was concerned, and artistic involvement. Each one of us got involved with the music at a time when the world was changing, when species were evolving, generations were waking up, revolution was happening, and folks were becoming aware of what was real and correct for them to live by. So in 100 years from now, I don't think the history will be erased if enough of us are awake enough and active enough to keep it on the planet and keep it within the reach of the younger generations coming along. The history was that, back from the days of old folk music, blues, etc., out of all our social experiences, whether yin or yang, we became artists as we continued to be artists as we were in the centuries before our time. And we just evolved and continued that because I think that is the DNA to which we were born. And those things are fact, and those realities. In 100 years from now, people who are intelligent, wise, and curious enough will look into it and find out why it happened, how it happened, and how it's still evolving. And that's what we've all been about. And during the time when I became involved with the arts, there were many people around me who were doing and being involved the same way, and my predecessors were involved before me. Therefore, they threw me information that allowed me to grow from one point to the next with their help and mentorship.
Who were the people who were giving you mentorship, particularly?
Well, I think many of them, if I should name them, you wouldn't know those. My community was folks like you mentioned before. My predecessors, my names, my neighbors, the Van family, Archie Shepp, Lee Morgan, the Booth family, Odine Pope, Tommy Monroe, Owen Marshall. I could just go.
Sure.
Johnny Splorn, John Coltrane, the Massey family, Wilbur Campbell, Charlie Rice. I mean, just everybody who came along before me, who reached out to me and said, "Hey, Reggie, come over and do this gig with me. Hey, Reggie, let's go to this concert. Hey, Reggie, let's go downtown where Clifford Brown is going to be doing a concert on Saturday afternoon with Max Roach, and you can go because they don't serve alcohol in the music center where it's going to be." And that's the way we grew. You go to school and you ask for an instrument. They didn't have an instrument, so they finally got an instrument, which was a bass, which was a tuba and a euphonium. That's where it started. And then no bass, and then finally my cousin said, "Well, listen to this sound," and that's Charlie Biddle, who also stood me up and decided bass and said, "Play this instrument and do it this way." And I like the sound, and I look for that, so I grew in that direction. And here we are today, still growing in that direction.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get to sit down with McCoy Tyner once, and he talked about Philadelphia, and he really described it as a real community, as a place where the neighbors knew each other and everybody was part of raising each other up. Was that your experience?
Same thing. And community was not just a few blocks of people. Community was the whole city, where every area had a particular sound of musician who would make music together and perform a certain way and work on certain things. Then you go to another part of Philadelphia, you have another group of musicians. So, and you have South Philadelphia, West Philly, where McCoy Tyner was. You have Germantown, North Philly, where I was. You have Tioga, where Lee Morgan was. You have North Philly, where Charlie Rice and Benny Golson and all of them were, with John Coltrane and his family and friends were. That was our community. And that community extended itself into the suburbs like Norristown, where Jimmy Smith's father used to play, and we used to have to go and perform with them and for them. And you have Camden just across the bridge, where a lot of musicians, where Buster Williams happens to be from. You know, that was our community. And the music grew, and the music was a part of our evolution, and not only our evolution, but the people's evolution as well. You couldn't have a party, you couldn't celebrate your birthday or have a cabaret without having music in those days. That was the way we grew, the way we rolled. And, you know, on the weekend, there was a concert at the Earl Theater, which would bring Charlie Parker in. And if you were smart, you'd be able to buy it. If you were wealthy, you would buy a ticket if you were well-to-do. Or if you couldn't, you would find a way to befriend somebody who would help you to get in, or you'd stand by the door outside and listen. You know, all those things. Herb Gordy, who was doing arrangements for the theater when Charlie Parker would come to town. You know, he lived right down the street from Archie Shepp. And the musicians were all over Philadelphia, and they all knew one another. That's why McCoy, I think, said that was a community, and we grew together.
Yeah. Do you remember your first time hearing Charlie Parker?
Yeah. I was a baby boy, and I couldn't get into the club, and I used to have to go and stand by the door, and then there was a Kid Happy was a bouncer at the club, and he would see Lee Morgan and I or some of the other musicians and myself standing by, and he would say, "Come on, boy, come on in here," and he'd put us in the corner and sit a fruit punch in front of us to keep the waiter away, and we'd get a chance to hear some music. And that's the way I heard several musicians as a young man. I wasn't a man. I was a young male. I was like under 18, under the age to be going to clubs. Still in high school or junior high school, but I was able to take advantage of the music that was all around me, and that was a part of it.
I would imagine seeing someone like him would have been like a revelation. Like it's something unheard. Was that how it hit you with him, and maybe were there other artists that just changed your whole worldview of what music could be?
Yeah, well, there were many other artists. Every one of them were important, because at those times and in those days, we didn't just listen to Charlie Parker because he was one of the great people who walked our way. But there were many great people who came along before and after, like the blues people, like the Ink Spots, like Nat King Cole, like Lionel Hampton, like every walk of life, every kind of music, and we would listen to, we would have to understand it. We would have to know that this was a part of our being. This was a part of what we are made of, the cornerstones that we are standing on. Unfortunately, the young people today, they don't have that experience. And I think that's one reason I can say we're glad now here to be at the new school, where we can at least touch base with those young people and try to pass on to them some of the experiences that we have had, and give them some of the value systems that we grew up with or grew along with and brought us to this point. And that's very valuable for young people who did not experience that. Fortunately, they have YouTube. They can click on every person they want to hear and know what it sounds like, know who did what when, because the internet, the modern technology has given them another way of evolving, unlike the way that we evolved. But they need to know that there were things that happened before you click on the internet that was a part of life, a part of the very existence that we had to live through, that gave us a certain timbre that you don't get from clicking your computer on. And clicking your computer on is certainly valuable and a part of what we have to deal with. So what the young people have to deal with today. And in order for them to understand where that image that comes to the computer when they click it on comes from, they have to be in touch with their history. They have to read. They have to conceive what happened, or they have to be in touch with us, you, who can pass on some of the knowledge to them.
Yeah, one thing that Randy Weston said when I was lucky enough to speak with him, he said, in Africa, but he was talking about Africa, he's also talking about maybe Brooklyn back in the day, it didn't take the New York Times to tell you if someone was good or bad. It was a relationship with the audience. And it sounds to me like whether it was a party or in a church or in a club, what was considered good wasn't just decided by a critic and the people on the bandstand. It was the whole community was kind of deciding on those musical values. Is that accurate?
It's quite accurate. The critics happened because of what the music and the community had created and revered. And then the critics came along and said, there's something going on here. We want to know about it. We want to write about it. And then it got to the point where the critics were dictating what's yin and what's yang, which is the way of the world.
Yeah. Well, before we go down that path, because you could linger on that for a while, I'm curious. What was like the family business when you were growing up? What were your folks doing?
Well, my father was first thing he was a bridge working for a construction company, building bridges, and eventually he stopped doing that after a bridge collapsed and he was injured. He recovered from that and decided to become a chef. And he opened his own restaurant where we used to have, as little tots, we used to travel many miles on the bus or subway or train and go to the shop where he opened his restaurant in West Philadelphia, out near where McCoy lived, and work at the restaurant, learn how to do the business with him. Learn how not to be in the neighborhood where there were a lot of things happening that could have steered us the wrong way, or keeping the family together, keeping in touch with one another, keeping in touch with our parents, keeping in touch with us, and so forth. My mom was she was a wife and mother of 15 children, so
wow.
You can imagine how many hours she had to do whatever she had to do. And what happened as a result of that, like, she evolved and decided, well, I've been raising the family up to this point. I've done what I can do. I want to do something else. So she became a nurse. And she went to school and decided to evolve, and she became a nurse and started working as a nurse. And began to do that. Meanwhile, my father moved from his business because, for whatever reason, whether it was the rent or whatever, he moved to a hotel where he was offered more money, and that was his job. His switch was spanking the wolf, which we all must have. And that's the way the family evolved. And then, meanwhile, the children, or the species of spouses, are growing into themselves, going their own way, going to do the things that were important to them. And each one had a special experience, which it would take me too long to tell you about all those experiences.
Sure, yeah, you take 15 times anything. It turns into
well, only
a lot.
13 of us lived.
Oh,
so.
okay. So when you mentioned that it was in school that the bass entered your life, or when did like formal training come in? Because it sounded like music was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So when did that come in?
Well, as I said before, the bass came in. My parents recognized some talent, or recognized the importance of music, and would give me piano lessons on Saturday, where I'd have to travel downtown and go to my teacher and practice and after school and so forth. And it was the piano at first, all music, but still the piano was the foundation. And then later on, when my cousin began to rehearse his band at my house, and my mom decided that she was going to, or my parents decided they were going to get up Spinet to be at the house, and for my cousin to rehearse here, for me to practice and so forth, and so I wouldn't have to go down to a relative's house in North Philadelphia to practice and then come all the way up to Germantown to go home. This cousin, Charlie Biddle, came to me and said, listen, boy, stand up on this chair, and put the bow in my hand and told me to touch the instrument and said, "This is the way you do it. How do you like that?" And so I don't think he really realized the importance of what he was doing as far as I was concerned, because that experience and that sound and that vibration of the instrument and coupled with what I was watching him do made me gravitate to the bass violin.
Yeah. You knew it. That was when you at first
as a child, a young man, a young person, I realized there was something here that I would like to explore, so I continued to do that.
You certainly did. And so I'm so curious. Well, one thing you said at the very beginning of the conversation, you said it's important people understand the music and the history and the spirituality. And I think that the spirituality is probably the hardest to put into words, but might be the easiest to slip from people's understanding. So some people have said that, Count Basie was spiritual and Duke Ellington was spiritual, but then it wasn't always overt in the same way as maybe John Coltrane made it clear, or maybe Yusef Lateef. I'm not sure about. I'm just riffing here, but what did people talk about what we can hear as such a spiritual element in this music? Was that discussed? Was that something that people spoke about, or was it unspoken?
Both. It was spoken in some cases where people decided they would explore it, and it was lived more so than spoken about. It was our life. It was our evolution and our chosen voice. The music which became what we know as today was the vehicle that we chose to get whatever thought and whatever we had to offer creatively across, was the vehicle to get it compiled, composed, and out to the world. And I think each one of us that you can name had a particular mission, whether written or known or unknown. It was something that was in the air universally. And if you go back all the way back into the days of Confucius, you find that the same thing happened with every artist. And you go back to Prokofiev, Mozart, Bartok, Beethoven, Shakespeare, writer, and sculptors, scientists, Einstein. So anybody who created something that was credible in the world had a mission. And that mission was pursued because they were ordained to do that by the forces that are beyond our control. And I think that goes for all of us and all of our students who have chosen to be here. And a lot of the parents come here. I have met a lot of the parents who say, "Why should my child study jazz? Why is it that, how is he going to raise a family? How is he going to make money?" That's a parent who understands what the world is, how the world is considering jazz. That's a parent who understands that the world or the people are not supporting the music, the arts, the way they could, as they have over the centuries, over the years. Many people don't understand that a lot of our classic masters and composers of the days were supported by the governments, by the hierarchy, by the people in power who knew the power of the music or the science of sound and how it affected their community and how it affected their social situation. So they would support it. And it was supported in such a way that they could take full advantage of it and understand it. Today, it's a little bit different. We still have support for it, but we don't have the magnitude of support, and we don't have the value system the same way as it has been many centuries ago. And we would like to know that it can get back to that. It can be that. And there are many people who understand that this is important.
So, one thing I noticed listening to those 100 hours or breezing through them of these different recordings is a lot of guys chose you who swing really hard, like Mal Waldron or Art Blakey or these guys, where there's like a certain intensity that can be kept and sustained for a long time. Is there a technique musically or otherwise that you think helps you and these other artists, like an Art Blakey or Ed Blackwell, to just hold that intensity and power of swing?
It's a hard question to answer because each one of the names you mentioned swing a different way, have a certain value, a different value. And as a bassist, one of the things that I have had to learn to do is know those values and know how that swing relates and know what's needed for that particular dialogue. I think each one of them is going to be different, and if you have listened to that much of the music, you know that each situation is different, each feeling is different, and the person who is the organizer of that moment, or we might call it the leader of the project or the organizer of the project, has a particular thing that they want to accomplish. And they have to think, who is going to best help me to accomplish my plan? And many times I was chosen, many times I was not. And I understand the times that people make decisions, it's according to their whim and according to what they want to accomplish. And looking back over it, the advantage of having a recording or putting something down into the annals of history is that you can look back and evaluate, and all of those people who you dealt with, you're talking about different style of swing. It's interesting to look at it. I remember when we used to sit around and listen to musicians and listen to the records and listen to compositions that had been put down by different people. We would discuss them, and we would learn to recognize them by sound, and we would learn the characteristic of each person, each musician, or whatever they did, each vocalist who came to the podium, and we would, in so recognizing and understanding it, it helped us to shape whatever we became. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I still think that some people just the raw power it takes, something this level of concentration or something that is consistent, whether you're playing with Roy Haynes or Elvin Jones. There seems to be a level of focus or something that must remain consistent. So is there something that you could touch upon that puts these artists who are now icons, that separates a really transcendent artist from just a mere great artist? Is there have you noticed a certain quality amongst these giants?
Yeah, that's a big question, and I would like to ask you to let me take a break.
Yeah, let's go hear some music.
Because
cool.
One of the students is doing a recital right now, and I promised him that I would at least show my face.
Sounds
there.
good. All right. Cool.
And maybe we can continue.
Yeah, for sure.
That when we come back.
I know it's been a long day.
Yes, every day is a long day, man.
Well,
so where were you asking a question?
I was just asking about kind of that there's certain musicians who kind of transcend their instrument, and then there's other people. I'll put myself in that lower category of, and they're not going to make statues out of me for my guitar playing, at least, So, yeah, can you put your finger on that thing that is shared from Yusef Lateef to Archie Shepp to Charlie Parker and all these other people you've witnessed or played with, on the band?
I haven't played with Charlie Parker.
I know you haven't played with him, but yeah.
But there are many other greats that I've been fortunate enough to make music with, and I think because we're all on the same plane of thought, and we all are having similar value systems, I think that's the thing that's bringing us together. Mm. Because you don't go out at a certain point in your professional career, you don't go out knocking on people's doors saying, give me a job. People come to you because they know who you are. People come to you because they heard you, or they examine you, or they heard of you, and they look to see if you are the person who has the right vocabulary for the dialogue. And that's the beauty of this profession, professional music, that it does its own orchestration, because of who you are and what message comes through you. And I think that all of the people who are on that level understand it and relate to that reality. So I feel fortunate to be a part of that,
Yeah, I kind of, there are these people that I'd be angry at myself if I didn't get a taste of your knowledge from being around them. And so maybe you could just tell me a little about the essence of some of these people, or something you learned from them, like someone like Alice Coltrane.
Well, you're starting at the top, basically, really, because she was one special woman. She was one special person. And, the music that we made, when you mentioned records, you didn't mention Transfiguration.
Yeah, beautiful record.
I hope that you heard that.
I did, yes.
And there was something special that happened at that time. And the spirits were very high. And what she did with the sound, and she played the Wurlitzer because she was able to make it sound like a soprano. She was able to do that, and she was able to sculpture that sound in such a way that nobody else has been able to do it but her. And she has taught a lot of people. I know she has taught Rada Botafacina, who takes care of the Asaram in California, and Alice Turia gave her her harp, and taught her a lot about the music. But nobody could do it like her. And John recognized that, when he was studying harp, they were calling his music, it sounds like sheets of sound. They were not understanding the technique that he had with making these what they called sheets of sound, of dealing with that kind of sound from the saxophone, making that kind of arpeggio do a certain type of thing within the music. And part of that came from his studying numerology and Hindu style of approach to rhythm and sound. For studying the harp, he had a friend in Chicago who he used to go to study harp. And then Alice Turia, who was in the church doing the gospel music, when he and Turia got together, I think that's when he encouraged her, or bought her the harp, and encouraged her to explore that sound. And out of that came something very special, because when you hear her deal with the piano, she deals with the sound of the piano the way that she was able to write the sound of the harp. And there's something different there, something that most people don't recognize, but I think that those who are open to exploration understand it.
Yeah, on that album, I felt that while she was playing, sometimes very much in that style of a free saxophone player, at that same time, while there's almost an abandon, you can also feel the steadiness of like her spirit behind it. She's so you feel tranquility at the same time as you're hearing, such free ideas and different scales, different ideas. Was that reflective of kind of who she was as a person?
Yeah, that was who she was. There was a beautiful tranquility, but also a powerful strength that was present at the same time. And I think that's when you reach a certain spiritual plane, I think that's something that you accomplish. That's something that you grow toward, and it's something that all of us relish. We're happy when we reach that place. And, meditation sometimes gets us there, practicing gets us there, exercise gets us there, different things get us there, gets us to that particular place. That's different things that we do. Sometimes it's just like sitting down to an enjoyable meal, and that meal might be the experience that you have in the world of people, that might be the knowledge that you get from communicating, creating a spiritual dialogue with the people who you happen to be in contact with, and that you can appreciate. And you learn to digest it, you learn to decipher it, you learn to recognize it, you learn to identify it and how it fits with your psyche and your ideology and so forth. And again, it turns out to be a beautiful mixture of ideas and energy. And that's the kind of energy that was present with Turiya. That's the kind of energy that was present with John Coltrane. That's the kind of energy that's been present with most of the people whom I've had the pleasure of dealing with. Even though each one of them came to it from through a different door, that energy is consistent because it's universal. And all of us who do all of these things that deal with universal law, I think, are coming from the same spiritual experience or spiritual direction.
And there's a presence. It's about and the present moment is an essential thing of between having a meal that somehow takes you to a higher plane from the conversation, or playing music with a great musician.
Making music.
Mm-hmm. So, since you were in his presence, was there anything that John Coltrane particularly communicated to you, overtly or not overtly, about music that stuck with you, or even humanity?
Well, most of the things that we talked about, he was not a very talkative person. He would talk about things of the moment, and everything that he talked about, everything that he said, or that we said to one another, was important and stuck, and had a special place in my life. He was responsible for a great part of my evolution, and I'll ask you to digress with me for a minute, because your first question was about a certain kind of energy that comes from the different people that I've been in contact with. And that is why I brought up Turiya, because those people who you mentioned have that energy, but you didn't mention Turiya. You didn't, because somehow people don't think about her in the light of being one of our special spiritual mentors and people who are in our existence, because she was living in the shadow of John. She was not we who knew if she wasn't living in the shadow. She was living beside him. She was One of his beautiful supporters over the years, of course, his former wife was as well, but for different reasons and different times. And all of those experiences that we all have cause us to be who we are. But I wanted to be sure that we recognize persons like Turia, who came up with certain beautiful things. Like we think about Aretha Franklin, we think about Marvin Gaye, and we think about Nina Simone, and we think about all the vocalists, for example, who deal with the spoken word and the invocation of the word itself. You know, that's another gift. That's another language, and another way of bringing a message through ourselves from on high to the people who you are ordained to deliver it to, you know. And that's why I think you do what you do. You say you're a guitarist, and so that you know what sound is about. You know what's happening with how you make the people or the recipient feel when you make your music, and when you make your chords, and when you make your intervals and your things in music. We all are doing the same thing, and no matter whether we're speaking, no matter whether we're graphic or visual artists and we're painting. I don't know if I have it here. I went to a painting at the National Art Gallery. I was down there with Trio 3 recently in Washington at the National Art Gallery, and they had Oliver Lake, of course, is with Trio 3. He's a part of our trio, and then one of his hometown friends that he grew up with is a visual artist, and he paints, and he had a big exhibit of large works at the National Art Gallery, so that they had a panel discussion about that, how it grew out of the experience with Bag, and how Bag had dancers. The body, that's another thing I didn't mention. I talk about the spoken word. I didn't talk about the movement and the sculpture of materials and how the signs and symbols. And that's another thing that would take us another week to talk about that, the signs and symbols, that we think we're reading words, but we're actually looking at symbols that the monks put together when they went up in the mountains and studied that. So we all come to the same place, and all of our art and all of our effort and all of our creation and all of our knowledge goes to the one. You know, it goes to the one, the ultimate force that we are emanating from, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I first of all, for the record, Alice is my goddess. Alice Mortuary. That's and especially for those of us very involved with Indian classical music, she's the reason a lot of people who were in jazz, they heard that tampura, like myself. Mm-hmm. And he said, "There's something there. There's something more." You know, and I actually just got back from India, but I'm still following that mm-hmm. sound there. Another person I was just wanted to get your take on, because he's such an original thinker and being, is Yusef Lateef. Mm. I wonder if you could tell a little about what you gleaned from him musically or as a thinker.
Yeah, he was a very deep person as well, a very deep thinker, very deep spiritual individual, and very different person from a John Coltrane, but still the same kind of depth coming through a different door. As I use that example, Yusef Lateef had his own way of doing things. He was very prolific. He was one who liked to write things down and understand what makes things work. And when I worked with him, I was fortunate enough to be with his group when he had when he had James Black from New Orleans, when he had George Arvanites, when he had Mike Knock. Arvanites from France, and Mike Knock from I think New Zealand, I believe he was from, and myself, and he put things together, and he did the way he approached the music, the way he approached the sound of his instruments, the way he dealt with his breath control and phrasing was something really special and unique unto himself. Nobody I can remember did it the way he did it, and had a marvelous sense of humor. He was very, very different than many of the people who I had the opportunity to spend time with. Many years, traveled a lot together. We were driving from New York to the West Coast and stopping in Detroit, and while we were fortunate, we had this accident on the highway while we were in a station wagon driving to Detroit, but we all survived it. Everything came along okay. We went to California during the time of the riots and the racism that was going on now there, where people were shooting at the cars as they passed it. And our job was canceled because of that, because of so many racist problems in the California area. We had to spend an extra week or two in the hotel waiting for things to calm down before we went to Howard Rumsey's Lighthouse to finish the gig, and I think some of that was recorded.
That's a record, yeah.
I believe it was. I don't know whether it was ever commercially produced, but those are things that happened at that time. And it's just so many experiences, man. Each time you come up with a question, it brings
yeah.
another era of my life that I try to recall.
I mean, it seems like a totally different type character would be Lee Morgan.
Yeah, well, he was a different character. He was a different type of character, much younger, also given the gift of great talent from a very young age. And a lot of people didn't know he was really great and talented before the jazz world ever recognized him. And he was at Mastbaum, and he was going to school and dealing with the orchestras and all. He was nailing all those parts and uniquely making all that music way back then, along with Kenny Rogers. And he and Kenny Rogers went to Mastbaum together. That's Kenny Rogers, the Philadelphia alto saxophone player. And Lee brought him in on a couple of record dates, I think. Kenny's still alive. He lost he's born again. I think he lost his limbs, but he's still alive. I talk to him once in a while. But Lee Morgan, he was a person, had a very, very, another big sense of humor, a very unique and egotistical, brash young man from a very special family. His older sister, and I think her name was Mabel, and my older sister Gloria went to school together and were singing in the same high school choir, things like that. Some of the musicians who I grew with lived right around the corner from Lee. We used to hang out at his place in Tioga and meet, and that's some of the time that we used to sit down in his parlor and study the music and listen to people and criticize and critique and discuss characteristics of musicians, which is something that doesn't happen today. We don't have those listening sessions today in schools, which I'm always trying to encourage that we need. We used to have a library here, but that library seemed to have dissipated and disappeared. People took the projects home. People didn't understand the value of keeping that stuff present. Well, now it's a possibility of digitizing those things to keep it so that to make it so that it can be available to the world, instead of having a vinyl thing that sits there and may get destroyed. You digitize it and put it on the net and put it on this system so that someone can tune into it. They may not get all of the nuance because it's digitized, but they can at least have access to it. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said these students don't realize how important and how fortunate they are that they can put their fingers on all of this music and all these experiences.
Yeah. No, I mean, still, when you have one record, you really know it. And when you have every record ever recorded, you might not wear out the needle, so to speak, in the same way. Like, what do you remember your first records that you got your hands on?
So to speak. The first records I got my hands were 78s. Heavy 78s,
thick
and of all the great people, because first of all, my father had a restaurant with one of those record players. You put a nickel in and you play.
Right.
Put a quarter in, you play 5 tunes. You put a nickel in, you play 1. Yeah. And a lot of those things, when the person came to change the records, we were able to acquire them. A lot of those things we were able to go to the store because we heard it on the jukebox. We were able to go to the store and buy it because it was a favorite or something we felt we needed to learn. So that goes all the way. My first records go all the way back there, and not many of them are still preserved. As you grow and move around from place to place, hundreds of records get lost.
And what was the genres?
Well, the genre was all kinds of music, rhythm and blues and gospel and some classical, mostly popular, theater tracks, radio shows, comedy shows.
Oh yeah, Bob and Ray. Did you know those guys?
Bob and Ray.
They were radio comedians.
No, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Bob and Ray.
Okay.
But maybe I do. Maybe it's just not coming
or before
to
your
me
time,
now.
maybe.
And I don't know whether it was or not. It could have been, because they don't stand out in front of me.
Yeah.
At this point, I can't always recall all the details that were there, and sometimes you say something and it sparks a thought and brings it back, but doesn't always. Bob and Ray, I don't remember what they did. Mm-hmm. It may have been important.
No, it's not that important. It's a whole era that people forget about. It's radio comedy, And
yeah, speaking of radio, when we listened to Thelonious Monk's Ask Me Now, do you remember Mr. Clean on the radio, finder of missing, tracer and finder of lost persons? Do you remember that theme song?
I don't.
Well, if you don't, then you would not realize what may have influenced Monk to write Ask Me Now.
All right.
So a lot of those theme songs that we used to sit on the floor in front of this big radio that had the speaker that looked like that, and listen to all those theme songs that were coming at us those days. We could see the picture of the story that was being told on the radio, but in our subconscious we were hearing this music. So I think that all of us were fortunate enough to hear that and perhaps reiterate that in our own ways, and that may be where Ask Me Now came from.
Wow.
Because when I go back and listen to what I was listening to then and recall what I was listening to then, I feel a great similarity.
And Monk is someone that you rub shoulders with.
Yeah. We had good fortune of spending some moments together. I worked along with him, did a few jobs with him. That was during the time that Paul Jeffries was in the band, the late Paul Jeffries. And we did a few jobs, and prior to that, I was the one who was asked when we were having collective black artists to go and go ask Monk whether he would, we're doing these special tribute concerts. I don't know if you were around at that time when we did the concerts in tribute to Mal Waldron, and tribute to Max Roach, and tribute to Benny Golson, and Slide Hampton was directing our orchestra, and we did so many people. Pharoah Sanders, you name it. When we had that organization, we were raising money to give these concerts and put the musicians who were in the orchestra to work, because we weren't getting calls from the studios as we needed to do in order to make our ends meet. So we were doing those tribute concerts like that.
But was anything revealed? I mean, Monk seems like such a hard figure to try to. I mean, it's like this archetype of this trickster kind of guy that you know. I mean, did you ever like be like, oh, okay, now I get it with him, or could you understand where he's coming from?
Yeah, I did. I understood where he's coming from, but at the time that he didn't feel like I understood where he was coming from was when Collective Black Artists organization asked me, well, man, you're working with Thelonious Monk. Why don't you ask him to do a special concert for us? Why don't you, you're so close to him, you're elected, you ask him. So while we were at the Vanguard in the kitchen, hanging out that was our backstage green room, was an old kitchen at the Village Vanguard, which still exists. Monk would be dancing around with his several glasses of brandy in one hand, and moving around and dancing from one thing to the other. And I finally got him to stop long enough to say, hey, Monk, have you heard the concerts we've been doing? We would really like you to do a concert with us, and we're doing some real special concerts at Town Hall. Would you do one with him? He wouldn't answer. He would just keep on dancing. He would just keep on dancing, and I would ask him again, and he would dance around, throw a jab at me that just went right across my shoulder, throw a jab, and he knew he wasn't going to hit me, but he was trying to say to me, how dare you ask me to do something like that? I'm beyond that point. And one of the answers he says, no, I've done that. He was referring to Hall Overton and what he did at the town hall with the big band and stuff, and so he was saying in his own way, don't ask me to go back to where I was then. I'm beyond that point. I'm not doing that now. The same thing happened when I was asked as a spokesman to go to Miles's house and ask him to do the concert. I had the same experience. He said, hey, man, come on in here. And after I came in there, he began to say, I'm glad to see you, but, man, don't ask me to do something like that. I spent all this time trying to get my salary up to a certain point, and now you're asking me to come and do a benefit and do a concert for money that is nowhere near where I've grown to. He says, I know what you're doing. I know everything that you guys have been doing. You asked me to donate some money to you, that's a different story. But don't ask me to destroy what I've built in order to support what you're doing, even though I'm in tune with it. And that was during the time we were doing Herbie Hancock and Donald Byrd at the Apollo. And all of us were working hard to make these things happen, because without our effort, it wouldn't have happened, because the industry had kind of turned away from where we were growing to, or where we were going to with the music. And it was up to all of us, I mean all of the people in the same community with the same aspirations, those of us who rented a loft and became Ollie's Alley and Riverby Studio and Muzart Studio and the Cooler and all these places that we went to do our work. The Artist House was on it. Everything that the Ervin Lounge that was down in the Tribeca area. Everybody worked hard to keep these things happening, to keep the music alive, and to make sure that the people, those who are still awake, got a chance to hear it, and those musicians who are still creating got a chance to have their creation critiqued by the listener who would come to these places that we created in order to have a place for this music to happen. And we just talked about earlier, just before you got here, the East Cultural Center was one of those places that we did the same type of thing that we were doing with Collective Black Artists in the East and New Muse in Brooklyn. All those were efforts to keep the music alive. The Streets, the Jazzmobile with Billy Taylor, who created Bring the Music to the People if the people won't come to the music. And that's where the floats that came to your neighborhood to make music, came from. And all the things that we had to do in order to deal with keeping the music alive was a part of our job, and that's what we did.
And it worked. Yeah. I know a lot of people that learn music from Jazzmobile.
Mm-hmm. See, those things are important. That is important. And here we are today, we grew through that area and somehow we come together. Now we're reaching out electronically to people in the world who were not there, who don't understand why we're here, what we're talking about, what happened, but they may get some spark that will cause them to do some research, listen differently, think differently about the music that's commonly known as jazz.
Yeah, it is remarkable, right? I mean, did you guys realize or have a sense that this was going to travel the world in the way it had or did? Like, that in Japan they would be listening to Live at the Village Vanguard like right now, did it feel like history was being made? Did it
we didn't have a sense that people would be listening at Live at the Village Vanguard now, but we did have a sense that whatever we were doing was important. Above all, it was important to us because we were gifted and chosen to do it. And we were rewarded for doing it from the way that it made us feel. And the way it made other people feel. And we recognize that Louis Armstrong was so important as an ambassador with the music that the people all over the world began to like it. Before him, there were many others who were doing things that reached many people all over the world. So I think that the sense of whether or not people would be listening to it today, I don't think that was as important as really doing what we were doing.
Right.
And then recognizing the importance of what we were doing.
All right. I don't want to work you too much harder. You want this coconut water?
Is that water? Yeah.
Coconut water.
Yeah, I can use that. Let me share that with you.
So, yeah. This kind of brings up like jazz or music in general is not known to be the profession with the longest longevity of the people who practice it. But I'm not sure how old you are, but you've been around a while. So, is there certain choices you've made that have allowed you to be, vital and strong and present?
Well, I've made some choices that would have didn't allow me to be vital and strong and present over the years, and some of the things I've had to do were devastating. But the choices that I've made lately, during those travels, had caused me to become a different person. For example, I had changed my diet. I stopped eating meat when I realized that was not in tune with the human body. I stopped, changed. I started becoming healthy and exercising and meditating and realizing that you had to earn the longevity, and that took some work. And those are things that I'm very fortunate and lucky and thankful that I got those messages to do that. And when I met my second wife, and she encouraged me to change and stop doing what I had been doing and all the things I was doing, dissipating, staying up, staying out, consuming the wrong things. That caused me to be fortunate enough to be here I'm 82 this year. It's caused me to be able to be here, and I think that my whole life experience has been attributing some energies toward that existence, toward this existence.
So, around what years did you get into meditation and vegetarianism and stuff like that?
Well, that was way back when I stopped eating meat. It was, I guess, around late 50s.
Oh wow!
I was overweight and I was breaking out of my clothes and my whole body was excreting all these impurities that I was putting into it, and I lived differently, I felt differently, I smelled differently, my clothes fit differently, and when I changed, it gave me a new demeanor, it gave me a new way of being. And I realized that the energy didn't come from all those things I was consuming, So I changed and I began to meditate. I began to study Eastern philosophies. I began to live different life and tune into different things.
That was as far back as the 50s?
Around 58, 59.
Wow. And were other... I've heard, still now, for some reason, the musicians in this genre some people call jazz, they are drawn to Eastern philosophies and still talk about, are still interested in Taoism and Buddhism and all this stuff. So was that something in the air amongst the musicians? I mean, I'm sure Yusef was definitely down in that path, but were there others?
Well, there were many musicians who thought that way, all over the world. Many musicians, as musicians began to grow, I think I can just say that hypothetically, I believe that the science of sound opens certain doors to you, and it opens certain understanding and certain realization that you would not deal with if you didn't have that science of sound that you are studying and living and being nurtured by to compare to your former way of life. So musicians all over the world who grow that way and who study other musicians who are that way realize that there's another way of life than I have been existing or that we're taught is valid. And this is when during those years, you remember all of those so-called rock bands and rhythm and blues band, well, first rhythm and blues and then rock bands, and and folk and all that music, and all those musicians begin to awaken and begin to realize that there was something beyond what they had been taught. And they begin to realize there's something that I have not been a privy to, I've not been aware of, I have not been taught in my studies. And these musicians, or this music, or this society is opening something new to me. And when you were young, hopefully when you were around during those times of the 60s and the late 50s, I don't know how old you are.
Oh, I missed all that. I was born in 77.
Well, then you remember when the Who, you remember Kent State?
I'm aware of all that stuff.
Okay.
I wasn't alive during that time. Of course, Kent State.
And you remember the Hoover administration. You remember all those things with the Panther Party. You remember the studies of all those institutions and what the things that people were learning, the creation. We had to work hard to get music accepted by the academia, which is why we're here today.
Right.
We had to go through all those changes. Meanwhile, folks who were witnessing what we went through in those days looked over and said, hey, there's something to this. We better start looking into this lest we miss the boat. And consequently, things changed during the Vietnam War, during the Korean War, during all the political movements, during all the movements that came along with the folk, with the so-called hippies and the young white kids, as well as the aware black kids, the young black kids, the young black organizations, and people who were living and growing and giving knowledge to the people that they hadn't gotten before, became something that the governments didn't like. And that's why we had Kent State. That's why we had the Hoover administration. That's why we had the destruction of the Panther Party. That's why we had all of those things. That's why we had musicians who said, I want to do it this way. I want to do it, say something. We had poets, writers, and so forth, who are creating a different way of being. And that's to me, one of the gifts that I have been given is the ability to turn away from what was really leading me down a path that wasn't positive, and turning towards something that was quite positive, knowing from listening to my own body, my own self, my own psyche, that there's something positive and good about the way that you're developing now.
All this you're bringing up somehow leads me to something that I wanted to make sure we touched on, because it is kind of like a cultural like touchstone or something like that. The Pharoah Sanders Karma album seems to be like, it embodied a certain time and sound, and you were a big part of that. I mean, that bass line on "The Creator Has a Master Plan" is that's the thing. So by that point, well, first of all, it seems like you were in the. It seems like the what they call jazz musicians, it was always like 10 years ahead of everything else. Like even you getting into the vegetarianism 10 years before it starts going, people get interested in San Francisco. I'm asking, I'm bringing up a bunch of different questions, so you can answer what you want, but I would like to hear, one, it did seem that so much that sparked, say, what Miles Davis did in Kind of Blue became the modal rock music of Grateful Dead or Allman Brothers. So it seemed like you guys and your community was on the cutting edge of where America and other people around the world, their consciousness was going to end up.
The music you say it
well,
was
the
on
music,
plane.
but also what the ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, that's the evolution of the species.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened. Many things happened even before us that we didn't acknowledge. There are many things that happened in the history that were not acknowledged. That the species was constantly evolving, constantly growing, and those who were awake and aware and ambitious were doing things and creating things that satisfied their existence. And the world simply had to acknowledge it or recognize it or discard it or not recognize it in some cases.
Right.
And of course, like we who were doing that, we're not going to accept the fact that what we believe in is not acceptable and not valid. So we found ways to bring it out, and for those who could deal with it. Maybe I should wait until we finish this thing, but to mention it.
Oh, go ahead. I don't know if you remember this. When you were on the show at KCR, I had a bandage over my right eye because I had been jumped on the train.
Really?
Yeah, and it was actually I was pretty happy with the way it all went down. 'Cause I got my stuff back.
But you did.
Yeah.
Good.
But then you told me some horrible story, man. That because I was all bloodied up, and you said uptown you got bloodied up, or so, I think you were mugged or something like that.
Yeah,
and you went to
I got jumped by some drunk coming out of a party, and it was snowing or something. I was walking up from the subway, and I believe it was New Year's party or something, and they were turning out. All the people were turning out this party, and those who didn't have the dates that they wanted probably were looking for somebody to jump on. So as I was walking up, first it was a lady who fell down in front of me. One of the ladies with the tight skirts and on fell down in front of me and dropped her purse, and I stopped and helped her pick it up. "Are you okay?" She said, "Yes." "Go on." So I went my way, and when I'm walking up toward my crib from 137th Street, or maybe I had parked the car or something. I don't remember what it was, but I was walking up to the crib. I must have parked the car because I was below 136th Street then, and I was walking I was just passing the 137th Street subway station, and I heard somebody running up behind me. I didn't pay any mind because people are always running to catch a bus or catch a subway or something. And I looked over my shoulder, and I saw a guy running toward me, swinging. And I think it was two of them. And one of them hit me, knocked me down, and had a brass knuckle or a ring or something that I still have the scar.
I see it.
And I was more concerned with saving myself and my belongings, my bag and so forth, than I was concerned with trying to prove or anything. I couldn't prove anything. I'm an older person with these young drunken dudes coming out of cabaret. So that happened, and I went up the street to tell the police what happened, and they sped right by me, wouldn't stop. So then I went home and thought about what it could have been had I been carrying a weapon or something. I could have been the one who would be persecuted because I would have responded differently.
Well, there's that. I mean, the part that really stuck with me is that you know, the whole we live in two Americas things.
Yeah.
You know, and
true.
And the fact that, you know, after all you've lived, all you've contributed to this society, that the cops would just drive by when you're bloodied up.
Yeah, they are about doing what they do, and they may not have been positive. They may not have been really out to do the best thing for the people. They were just out, you know.
Yeah. But it seems like there's takes a certain type of tranquility. Maybe is not the word, but like you got to be kind of philosophical, right, to be able to make your way through the world and know that there's this discrimination and racism, and that it's built into the fabric. Like you have to come up with a way to live with that other than bitterness and anger.
Well, hey, that's what my people have had to do for centuries.
Right.
You know, otherwise we would not be able to deal with this situation as we have. You know.
On the whole, would you say there's been some progress since the 50s?
As the people, as far as the
as far as that, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's been some progress. I don't think everybody has progressed, but there has been some progress because, you know, the life is continuing and still evolving. There are still some great things happening in the world. It's, you know, and a lot of it goes unnoticed. A lot of the things that have happened have not been, you know, rewarded, have not been noticed. But there has been some progress. People have grown to be a little bit more positive and more sensible in understanding that all those negative ideals are not going to last. The truth is going to prevail. I think it has to. And it may not be in our lifetime, but it has to prevail.
So one thing that's blowing my mind is like I just went over to Jeff Tain Watt's house, and I asked him. He has a big TV, and I said, "Do you watch TV while you practice?" And he said, "Hell yeah!" And I keep meeting these people that maybe keep a baseball game on while they practice, maybe with the sound off or something like that. And I always thought it was all about being present. And then I keep meeting great musicians who seem to be doing the opposite, at least in practice. So I was very curious, like, what do you think your mind should be on when you're playing or when you're practicing?
Well, it depends on where you are at the moment. I don't think that having a baseball game, there's some people who live by the baseball. They know everybody's average. They know everything. They study that. They wouldn't miss a game, wouldn't miss a Sunday when the basketball is tournaments are on. And there are some people who don't need that for their existence. I'm one of those people who I enjoy the baseball, not baseball, but basketball, football, and I enjoy tennis. I enjoy watching those things, but that's not something I want to have on while I'm practicing. I'm not trying to think about both of those things. But some people are multitask people. They can do that. They can listen to the baseball with one part of the sports, I'll say, with one part of their brain. They can and deal with the music with another part of their brain. That's another being, and there are different strokes.
Right. Well, has this ever happened to you? Because it happens to me. I'm playing music and I think, "Wow, I'm really getting it," and that's when I mess up. You know, like, is there like certain mental like spaces that one should
what do you
avoid
mean?
while you're playing?
What do you mean when you say that's when I mess up?
Well, yeah, because it's like becoming that's when the consciousness gets in the way. You know what I mean? Like I could be keeping great time, and if I think, wow, I'm keeping really great time, that's not going to help. That's what I'm saying. But
that's funny. I always say to my students, the more I learn, I don't know. And that goes all the way back to when I started reading the yoga books and studying Hindu philosophy. Mm-hmm. And they used to teach me when you develop to a point and you rise above a certain plane, the obstacles that were in front of you when you couldn't see, as you rise and you evolve, those obstacles are removed and you can see much further in the future. So, and I think the more you learn as you rise, the more you can see that you don't know, And I think that's a part of what we all go through as artists,
Mm-hmm. So do you have one thing, like when you're playing, is there something that you like to rest your mind on? Like, are you like, I'm gonna tune into this, into the drummer, like, or it's something like that? Is it? No. Is there a place you like to go, or?
No, it's not too. Well, it depends on the circumstance. What you're talking about is like, you tune into, if you're making music with a group, you're tuning into everybody. Mm-hmm. You have to listen to everything that's happening, and what you do is according to what's happening around you. Unless you are sitting down like a secretary taking dictation and just reading the notes and just deciding, I'm going to play this the way that it's written so that it'll sound like the composer wants it to sound. But if you're improvising or if you're creating, then you have to tune into what's around you, and you have to make your music accordingly. Like I could not possibly play with Elvin Jones the same way I played with Art Blakey. That just doesn't happen. They're two different characters. Their feeling about the music is different. Their ideas, the way they are inspired, what they're inspired by, or what they're disturbed by, or how they relate to the beat, the distance they have from one impact to the next is different according to who they are as an individual. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All those things depend on what we perform. After having worked with John Coltrane, who would say, you got to bring something to the beach besides sand. I don't want you to do the same thing that Elvin Jones is doing. And I thought that was hip because I had been working with Roy Haynes for so long, and it turned out that Roy is a predecessor of Elvin, and Elvin's grows out of Roy. Consequently, when I got that job, I found myself doing things that were the same things that Elvin was doing. I was landing at the same milestone. And John out front, he was listening to that, and he said, "No, that's not happening." He said, "Don't allow yourself to think that you're doing something hip if you're making the same statement as somebody else in the band. That's negative. I want you to bring something to the beach besides sand." Wow. So I had to learn what he meant by that when he said, you're going to turn our quartet into a trio. I had to learn what he meant by that and how serious that was.
Yeah.
Even though he said it matter-of-factly, but he was very serious in the way that he expressed that. In other words, what are you doing to add to the music?
Right. Do you have any memories of the Africa brass session?
It was a great session. A lot of great people in the studio. A lot of great music. A lot of beautiful sounds. Watch Eric, take McCoy's voicings and put it down for the sections. Watch the way John pulled the energies together and chose he wanted to listen to this person, that person. Something he heard Paul on, he told me to move over and let Paul play this track. Some things that he went over again. It was great. A lot of great music. I don't think I have any of that stuff with me.
Yeah. I mean, Dolphy, on some of those recordings, it's like he really learned Coltrane's language and then was able to incorporate his own thoughts and his own ideas and his own flavor. I mean,
yeah, well, Dolphy and John were very close. They spent a lot of time at John's house, and they studied a lot together. They talked a lot together. And Dolphy was one of those persons who was never going to lose himself in strife. He was a very heavy individual as far as his music was concerned. And even though he respected John, he was always going to bring himself to. That's what he came to us with. I was just looking at his name, right? Have you heard this? This is what was just put together by Zev Feldman. That's a project that he did.
Oh, wow. All right, final thing, because I really appreciate, by the way, you're very generous with your time. And thoughts
I'm going to have to wrap it up now because I know that people are wondering what the hell happened to me.
So maybe quick thoughts on all these great different drummers that you've interacted with. Is that too much?
Yeah, I mean,
that's too much.
That's a lot.
That's the whole thing.
Everybody has their own style, and
right.
I've been fortunate enough to be around with a lot of different drummers.
Yeah. All right, another time.
Yeah, some other time we'll deal with that.
All right. Well, maybe just lastly, maybe you could just tell us what you love about how you're spending your days now. Contributing so much with the education and what's the thing you're most excited about right now? Besides going to sleep when this is over.
No, not so much about that. One thing I'm happy about is that I've been able to remain here and stay in touch with new creation, new minds, as we heard at just the last concert, and be in touch with people who are looking forward to growing in the direction that we need soldiers to grow in, and who can understand what they're dealing with, embracing the science of sound and how important their mission is. I feel good about being here to try to spread that word to as many people whose ears are open enough to accept it. And I feel fortunate to be on the planet while my links to eternity, like that young lady there, who was the first black Juliet in the Shakespeare Company, and who is a child of my second wife and myself. And we're both friends. We're still working on one another's behalf. feel fortunate that I've been given the gift to receive this talent that's been given to me in this life to do what I've been ordained to do.
Well, thanks for all you've contributed, and thanks for taking the time. I learned a lot, man, and just got to put it to practice. Maybe I'll cut down on the meat.
That might help.
It's tough, man. East Flatbush, they got the jerk chicken. It's not easy.
Oh, I didn't say I cut down on fowl. I still eat fish and fowl.
Oh, okay.
I stopped eating meat.
Okay, the red meat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not supposed to eat salmon because that's considered red meat of the sea.
Interesting.
And but I don't eat it often, but I still love it.
All right.
I mean, I'm not completely cured. And my daughter is saying, "Daddy, I'm vegan. Don't you realize you can't offer me that now?" So she and my wife have become vegan. So when we go out to eat, I have to choose a different menu than they choose.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.